Some organizations confuse activity with progress. They measure effort, count outputs, track motion, but never ask the only question that matters. Did we move the mission forward? Because execution, real execution, isn't about getting things done. It's about getting the right things done in a way that can scale without burning out people or betraying the purpose. That's where most transformations collapse. Not in the ambition, not in the strategy, but in the systems of execution. Hi, I'm Mirza Chughtai, and this is part 3 of Transformation That Sticks. Today, we are going to confront the quiet failure point that leaders don't talk about enough. Why do so many transformations stall? Not because of bad ideas, but because their systems cannot be executed at scale. If you had led long enough, you know this pain. Strategy that dazzles, but a system that drifts. Great ideas, stranded by fragmented execution. This is the burden every leader carries. And if you want the strategy to live beyond the slide deck, then execution must scale beyond proximity to power. And that is what we're building today. Here's what I have learned. Strategy does not fail in the boardroom. It fails in the handoffs. Because ideas is scaled through systems. And without the systems, even the best ideas stall. I've seen this play out where strategy was brilliant, talent was undeniable, and the right people in the room made progress possible. But brilliance alone is not a system. And without a system, execution remains fragile. If the operating system of the organization is not designed for execution, then what you have is ambition propped up by heroic efforts until people burn out or simply give up. Scaling execution is not about moving faster. It is about making progress inevitable. And that takes discipline. 3, to be precise. Number 1, build an execution backbone. This is where you build the structural clarity that keeps the mission centered. 2, codify decision rights, not just decisions. This is the architecture of who decides and when. And 3, ruthlessly prioritize impact. This is the discipline of focusing energy where it actually moves the needle for the organization. But here's what often gets overlooked. Execution is not just about what gets done, or even why we do it. It is about the how. Because the how reflects the character of the organization. You can reach the same outcome in 100 ways. But if your execution is chaotic, opaque, or corrosive to the culture, then the victory is hollow and it does not scale. This is why systems thinking is so critical. Execution that scales is not just a checklist. It is a system where intent, action, and impact are connected by design and not by accident. So let's break these disciplines down with real scars and the real systems that makes execution scale. Let us start by exploring discipline 1. Build an execution backbone. In every transformation, there's a moment when the excitement fades. The launch energy dissipates. The strategy decks are archived. And what is left is the real work. This is where most transformations drift. Not because people stop caring, but because the system stops clarifying. Without structural clarity, every initiative risks becoming a side project. Every workstream risks drifting off course, and eventually the mission starts to fracture under its own weight. This is why every transformation needs an execution backbone. The structural spine that holds the mission upright when complexity tries to pull it apart. And building that backbone requires three things. First, declare the outcomes upfront because progress cannot be debated, it must be declared. Second, define the success signals. Success must reveal itself along the way, not just at the finish line. Third, strip away the work that obscures the mission. If it does not serve the mission, it has to go. Because clarity does not sustain itself. It must be reinforced through leadership discipline, or the system will default back to noise. Let me bring this to life with a real world example. I had the distinct privilege of leading the design and development of next-gen hybrid multi-cloud and software-defined data center offerings for global leaders in financial services, healthcare, and life sciences. These were not just technical deployments, they were full-scale re-architectures of mission-critical infrastructure, where the stakes were not just about uptime, they were about lives, compliance, and global financial stability. The goal was clear. Help clients architect a future state infrastructure that accounted for evolving technologies, balancing cost with risk while enabling long-term agility. We engaged deeply, guiding global organizations to safely navigate the journey of hybrid multi-cloud through actionable strategies for rehosting, replatforming, re-architecting, and refactoring applications. But strategy alone was not enough. To ensure execution scaled with clarity, we installed success signals across four distinct layers. 1. Advise. To ensure we were operating as trusted advisors, guiding clients to make decisions not just for today, but for the next decade. 2. Collaborate. To ensure we were integrating client operators, technologies, and risk leaders into every critical path decision. 3. Educate. To ensure we were building knowledge transfer into the fabric of the engagement so clients could sustain without us. And lastly, 4. To ensure we were aligning the first three signals with de-risking the entire ecosystem, ensuring the design, implementation, and enablement were built to future-proof the environment and enable continuous innovation and integration. Every engagement aimed to position the customer on a very clear cloud maturity curve, not just technologically, but operationally and strategically as well. And what did success look like? Well, we help clients define and create unique differentiators, the internal proof points their senior leaders needed to champion these transformations across the enterprise. Those differentiators had to meet three tests. They had to be unique, they had to be valuable, and they had to be proven. And then we held every action to a simple but ruthless filter. Does this build a capability that is unique, valuable, and proven? Or is it just motion masquerading as progress? If the answer was no, we stripped it out. Because the backbone is not just what you build, it is what you are disciplined enough to leave behind. That is how you build an execution backbone, not just to survive complexity, but to scale through it. Let's explore discipline 2. Codify decision rights, not just decisions. Every transformation begins with decisions. Where to start, where to prioritize, what to change. But here's what most organizations miss. Decisions will always get made. The real question is, who has the right to make them and when? Because when decision rights are unclear, one of two things happen. Either everything stalls as teams wait for someone to grant permission, or decisions are made quietly, without alignment, without visibility, and without accountability. Neither outcome scales, and both outcomes create risk. And that is why, in every leadership role I have taken on, I've asked my senior counterparts the same foundational question. What decisions do you want to be consulted on? And when can I make the call on my own? Because the clarity of decision right is not just about governance. It is about velocity. It is about creating the conditions where teams do not just act, they act with confidence because they know they have the mandate. Once that clarity exists at the leadership level, the next discipline is to extend it across the organization until everyone knows not just what is being decided, but who owns the decision. This is not about micromanagement. This is about engineering autonomy that is principled and not chaotic. Let's walk through a real-world example. Scaling Agile across 17 modules and multiple functions is a complexity multiplier. And without clear decision rights, it can quickly collapse under its own weight. One of the most complex challenges I've had the privilege of leading was the build of a cloud-first mobile accessible platform designed to unify the entire code-to-cash lifecycle. We were moving an enterprise from disparate backend specialist tools to a single unified platform designed to serve customers, partners, and employees simultaneously. And with that ambition came tension, because business leaders wanted features delivered yesterday. Operations leaders wanted every process to be bulletproof, and technology leaders had to navigate capacity, technical debt, and the gravity of legacy systems. If we did not structure the decisions right, every sprint risked becoming a tug of war. But here's the truth. The project was not born with this clarity. In the early days, we were stuck. Resources were constrained. The demand from the business was relentless. And every conversation became a negotiation between constraints and commitments. We had to change the conversation. I basically installed Discipline 2. Codify decision rights, not just decisions. And here's how it got implemented. We codified rights across 3 levels. Number 1, strategic decisions. These decisions were governed by the steering committee, who own the directional bets, business model shifts, risk thresholds, and capital investment. Number 2, architectural decisions. These decisions were owned by the platform and architecture leads, ensuring that every technical choice preserved scalability, compliance, and long-term integrity. Number 3, execution level decisions. These decisions were delegated to the delivery teams and business process owners. We empowered them to sequence, deliver, and resource within the strategic and architectural boundaries that were codified in number 1 and number 2. We did not stop there. We made capacity and resource transparency non-negotiable, correlating our delivery ability directly to CapEx, OpEx, and revenue impact. Now, instead of operating in silos, we had a shared operating model for change. Everyone knew their domain of authority, and everyone understood the trade-offs. Velocity improved, alignment held, trust deepened. Because decision-making was no longer a mystery. It was mapped, owned, and operationalized at scale. In effect, we actually created a new operating model for the company, one where change was no longer a burden, but a structured, value-creating capability. Technology function itself shifted from a cost center to an acceleration lever, present in every business conversation as a partner and not an afterthought. Because when decision rights are clear, autonomy flourishes within boundaries. And execution no longer depends on who happens to be in the room. Let's now explore Discipline 3, Ruthlessly Prioritize Impact. Execution that scales does not fail because teams are unwilling. It fails because the system demands too much of their time, their energy, and their focus on things that do not actually move the mission. Every organization says they prioritize, but when everything is urgent, when every initiative is labeled strategic, then nothing is. Prioritization is not just a project management tool. It is a discipline of leadership. Because what we choose to advance and what we choose to leave behind says everything about the integrity of our strategy. Let me give you a real-world example. I was asked to drive an innovation agenda focused on integrated solutions that converged data analytics and market research to accelerate new product development and optimize production pipelines across a sprawling multinational technology ecosystem. The mandate was ambitious: increase the internal rate of innovation, reduce time to market, and lower the total cost of delivery. But there was one constraint: everything was competing for the same attention. Brownfield environments needed modernization, greenfield initiatives were vying for investment, and the operational capacity of the organization was finite. We could not afford to treat every demand as equal. So we imposed a strict prioritization framework anchored on three filters. Number one, strategic alignment. Does this initiative directly advance the enterprise's strategy, or is it just an interesting idea? Number two, capacity match. Do we have the right people, the right skills, and the available bandwidth to execute this well, or are we forcing velocity or an exhausted system? Number three, impact horizon. When will we see measurable impact? Is it next quarter, next year, or speculative beyond relevance? But that acceleration was not the result of moving faster indiscriminately. It came from ruthless prioritization, knowing what to advance and what to leave behind. To govern this rigorously, we held weekly technology tower discussions, absorbing projected capacity demands by discipline, supporting the brownfield environments while establishing clear cutoffs to invest in next generation innovation-led greenfield initiatives. We then consolidated these priorities across all technology towers and brought them to the executive leadership team, where we aligned on investments, secured funding for the next cohort, and created what I call the X factor capacity, resourcing that allowed us to chase new strategic opportunities without sacrificing core commitments. Applying these filters and governance mechanisms forced some very difficult conversations. We sunset legacy programs that had outlived their relevance. We paused low impact work streams to redirect talent to higher value opportunities. We recalibrated initiatives that were scattered and sharpening their scope to deliver defined outcomes faster. The result? We reduced the time to market from 18 months to 6 months across more than 10 distinct technology ecosystems. Prioritization is not just optimization. It is discipline. It is how leaders show their respect for the mission, honor the talent, and protect the finite nature of time. Because when leaders prioritize ruthlessly, they preserve more than just resources. They preserve the credibility of the mission. Execution is not the afterthought of strategy. It is the proving ground of leadership because scaling execution is never a matter of brute force. It is the outcome of disciplines that make progress inevitable. Here's a quick recap. Discipline 1. Build the backbone so you can instill systems clarity. The what and how of alignment and where outcomes are not just declared, they are structurally reinforced. Discipline 2. Codify the rights so you can instill authority clarity. The who and when of decisions and where decisions are made with clarity, not by accident, but by design. And discipline 3. Prioritize the impact so you can instill resource and focus clarity. Believe me, the how is also worthy of our energy. And this is how we ensure the system does not drown in motion, but advances with precision. With these disciplines, when these disciplines are in place, execution does not just deliver results, it compounds them. Because that is the real test. Not whether the mission advances once, but whether it can scale, sustain, and adapt long after the initial momentum has faded. Execution that scales, when anchored in these disciplines, is how ambition becomes legacy and change becomes lasting impact. And that is the long arc. If these insights have resonated with you, please reflect on where your organization is strong today, where it drifts, and what disciplines need to be reinforced to make execution your strategic advantage. In the next part of this series, we'll confront the most decisive and often the hardest lever of all: culture that sparks turnarounds. I'm Mirza Chughtai, and thank you for building transformation that sticks.